Okay, well, the first story I want to talk about, I think, kind of fits in your wheelhouse, and that is this story about influencer vibe theft. So the question is sort of, can someone sue you for copying your vibe or aesthetic on social media? Did you hear about this story?
I did. And so what was interesting is I heard just sort of the general overview and the People article. And I opened my phone maybe an hour before actually we hopped on here. And the influencer that was suing was giving her spiel about like what actually went down and how she felt like the People article and also any other sources that covered it were like missing the beef of it. The real core of what the lawsuit was, which I found so interesting. And does also show sort of that angle of like how sometimes things can get lost in the social media sauce, aka where's nuance? Miss her. Nuance is MIA. But I'm
Where is
curious
she?
your thoughts, right? Yeah, I know. I've been looking for her for months. Haven't seen her. We'll have to, pull over, a few more stones. We'll see what happens. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on the case as a whole.
So, for folks who don't know, this was a lawsuit that was settled this week where two influencers were embroiled in a copyright lawsuit over their sort of aesthetic, which was this kind of neutral beige cream aesthetic. The lawsuit was settled this week. So, at first, I thought, like, how similar can these two influencers really be? But I looked them both up on Instagram and I was like, oh, they actually are pretty similar. They both kind of are Amazon influencers. So they do a lot of Amazon fashion hauls where they have like hashtag Amazon finds that are linked in like an Amazon storefront. Here's what went down. Influencer Sydney Nicole Gifford did a joint photo shoot in 2023 with another influencer named Alyssa Shield. After this shoot, Gifford's claims that Shields started copying her sort of minimal beige aesthetic and specific poses in her content. Then Shield blocked her on Instagram and TikTok. So Gifford sent a cease and desist, and those cease and desists were ignored. So Gifford filed a first of its kind federal lawsuit in 2024 alleging copyright infringement, trade dress misappropriation, and unfair competition. So, like you, Sammy, I don't think of this as like a frivolous lawsuit. Like, I was like, oh, this is deeply interesting because, as we know, influencers and content creators are a big part of the lifeblood of like e-commerce, and so it's like how brands like Amazon become very economically successful. So we're not talking about just like, oh, she stole my look. What she's arguing about is like a very specific kind of copyright and IP dispute. And so it raised the question of, can somebody sue somebody for allegedly like stealing their intellectual property on social media, which again I just find super interesting. According to the fashion law site Giffords, who commands over 500,000 followers across platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Amazon storefront, alleges that Shield systematically replicated her content and online persona to mislead followers and unfairly compete in the influencer marketing space. Central to Gifford's suit were her claims that Shield copied her copyright protected images, mimicked her appearance down to specific physical traits such as a flower tattoo, and appropriated the distinctive visual and stylistic elements associated with her brand. So, something I do find interesting about this is I I'm no attorney, but visually, when I look at both women's content, there is definitely a lot of aesthetic overlap happening. One of the women just recently had a child, and I'm like, oh, well, luckily that is one way to make, like, I was like, okay, well, that is a distinction because otherwise they're
Mm-hmm.
so similar. And it makes me wonder, like, in the age of Instagram, can anybody claim to sort of be unique or distinct when so much of what gets popular on Instagram because of algorithms is things that seem like copies of each other, right? Like all of the influencers use this specific pose. They have a specific manicure, a specific look. If both of these women are sort of shilling for Amazon clothing, like it's not surprising that they might have some overlap. But the case actually was essentially dropped with the influencer, the one accused of doing the copying, having to pay nothing. So it seems like that case might have answered that question of like, can you copyright an aesthetic? I'm not an attorney, but it seems like from this lawsuit, the answer is perhaps no.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And what the girl that was suing said in her TikTok was that she had to drop the case because it was getting incredibly expensive. So had she had the funds, like there may have been a continued pursuit, at least on some frame here, which I find interesting in and of itself. And I do think that in the creator sphere too, money gets in the way, right? We think about how many people would actually sue if they had the money to do so in terms of somebody copying them. We see it with small brands all the time, with big brands. We have, I don't know if you saw this, but there is in the city this vintage brand called Kissing Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's run by also like an influencer, one of those people that's just like at the cross section of many things. And Brandy Melville allegedly copied her logo, which she went on to say that is not just like a Canva logo or something like that. Her and her sister handmade the logo. And the brand has copy and pasted the exact logo onto a t-shirt that they have God knows how many SKUs of that they're selling in their stores. And so you have a small creator that has a small brand that doesn't have the funds most likely to sue and pursue this. So I think like that also is particularly interesting to me, because if creators had more monetary means, and same with small brands, where would that really lie? Like what would the decision process actually look like for that? It just leaves me with more questions. But I do think in this particular case, the thing that gave me the, ooh, that's a little creepy, and maybe it's almost like a different angle, is seeing the matching tattoos, the blocking, almost the intentionality of it. Because you also go into that other frame, right? Like if you are an influencer, you expect people to copy you, right? That's part of the job, is to push people to do things that you're doing, or to lead them to an idea to consider it. So where does that start and where does that end? I think there definitely is some gray area when the person is starting to get exactly the same body art and copying things at the same timetable.
Yes.
That's
The,
where I'm like, ooh.
the tattoo is what? So, like, she alleges that she has a very distinctive flower tattoo on her arm. And she says that this influencer who was copying her got the same distinctive tattoo. Like, first of all, that is commitment to the bit. That is, you were really committing to copying this woman. But it is uncanny. And the fact that they're both specifically Amazon influencers, they both do the Amazon storefront, hashtag Amazon finds. She basically is arguing that she is intentionally trying to confuse what would be their like audience market into like associating the two, which I think is like a very good point. So reflecting on this, Professor of Law and Media, Faculty Director of the Center for Law, Information, and Creativity, Alexandra Roberts, wrote, "It's surprising or not, deeming any of the Giffords' claims plausible for creators posting similar content has serious implications, thanks to the fact that influencer marketing has become increasingly central to commerce, and social media content more broadly is built on trends and served to users via algorithms, quick to push content related to what users click and or linger on in their feeds." Roberts asserts that intellectual property law has not traditionally protected the way somebody styles their hair, makes up their face, or decorates their home, whether or not those choices are photographed and shared. And I do think it's sort of, I mean, had this case, had the influencer who was making these allegations been able to have the funds to see this case through, it could have been very different. But had it been, had it gone differently, this could have potentially like set an entire new precedent when it comes to IP online, which I just find fascinating.